Welcome to Game of Books with Cathi in South Dakota.
That's me, and Christy in South Florida.
That's me. We're two newbie writers sharing our take on wine, food, and mystery books.
And the authors who write them. Join us for the fun. Welcome to Game of Books podcast, Corks and Conversation.
We are so excited to be talking with award-winning author Hank Phillippi Ryan.
We kicked off season 2 of our podcast, Game of Books, with a discussion of The Murder List, her current book that's out right now.
And now we get to talk to the author herself. And Cathi, would you like to do the introduction?
Oh, it would be my honor. It is our pleasure to welcome, like we said, award-winning author Hank Phillippi Ryan. Hank is the on-air investigative reporter for Boston's WHDH-TV. She's won 36 Emmys, 14 Edward R. Murrow Awards, and dozens of other honors for her groundbreaking journalism. She is also a nationally best-selling author of 11 mystery novels. She's won prestigious awards for her crime fiction: 5 Agathas, 3 Anthonys, the Daphne, 2 McCavities, and the coveted Mary Higgins Clark Award.
Whew, that's a mouthful, Cathi.
I know. I'm already exhausted. National reviews have called Hank a master at crafting suspenseful mysteries and a superb and gifted storyteller. Her novels have been named Best Thrillers of the Year by the Library Journal, New York Post, BookBub, Pop Sugar, and Real Simple Magazine. Her newest book is the acclaimed standalone psychological thriller, The Murder List. CNN named it the ultimate beach read, and the Library Journal, Rave, starred review called it a riveting must-read. Hank, we are so happy to talk to you today.
I'm so delighted to be here. It's such fun to listen to that introduction. You know, I'm sitting here in front of my computer in my office revising my new book for next year. And, you know, I'm in one of those writing days where I think, oh, no, this is never going to work. So you two are it's so reassuring to hear you two reminding me that sometimes it does work. So this is the perfect timing. I thank you so much for inviting me and for making my day be so much better.
Oh, that is so
thank
great.
You.
So before we get into the conversation, which we're so excited about, Christy, tell us what wine we're drinking today with our conversation.
Sure. As our mysterious foodies know, Cathi's in South Dakota and I'm in South Florida. And today we add a third location. Hank, I believe you're in Massachusetts?
Yep, I'm right outside of Boston.
All right. So if you two haven't already, go ahead and open your wine while I tell everyone how we were able to be drinking the same wine, which is the Llama Malbec. So we ordered these bottles to be delivered from Universal Fine Wine and Spirits. They ship just about everywhere, and now we can all test the same wine. And if any of your listeners want to join and taste some of our wines, you can order them from universalfws.com and get a $5 off your first order using the coupon code Game of Books. That's one word, Game of Books. So, you guys ready to take a test and see if this matches our tasting notes here?
Go
I'm
ahead.
more than ready.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's a modern wine with attractive dark cherry red color with violet hues. The nose shows great intensity. Fruity aromas of cherries, blackberries, and plums stand out against the background of a fine toasty hints from aging in top-quality oak. Warm, rounded, and well-structured on the palate with an explosion of fruit flavors underscored by light oaky notes and a pleasant, persistent aftertaste. So, what do you think?
I think you just described my book, right? Warm, rounded, and well-structured, you know, with a persistent note. I think that's good.
Right.
I've loved Llama Malbec for a long time. As a matter of fact, it's been one of my favorite wines for a while. And Lisa Gardner and I bonded over it. We were at a convention together, and we sneaked out to have dinner, and we were talking about wine, of course. And I told her that Llama Malbec was one of my favorites, and she ran right out and got it. So now it's one of Lisa Gardner's favorites, too.
Oh,
so
great.
We can toast her as well. She's
Okay.
such a marvelous author and such a marvelous friend. So we can think of her as well.
All right.
You like
cheers.
it? How do you like it?
I like it. What do you think, Cathi?
I think it's great, and I really when you taste it, it really is a big flavor right away, but it's just nice and smooth at the end. I think I'm going to be a fan too.
I know. And I think this is just a sipper. Yeah, this is a sipper as well as it can stand up against a nice hearty meal. So we can do whatever we want with it. We'll have
exactly.
Yeah, we'll have to talk to Lisa Gardner sometime too and share it with her.
I'm sure she'd adore to. I'm sure she'd love to. We can all sip Malbec together.
Sounds wonderful. Okay, so now that we have a glass of wine in hand, I'm going to start asking you the hard-hitting questions.
Uh-oh. I think you should make them warm, rounded, and well-structured.
I know. Actually, they probably will be, but I just wanted to be like an investigative reporter with you a little bit.
Oh, no. Run away.
So last week we talked on our podcast. We have a writer's perspective section, and we talked about how authors approach the book writing process. And that naturally leads me to ask you the same thing. How did you come up with the idea for the murder list? And then how do you approach putting that idea into a book?
Oh, my golly. Isn't that the question of the universe? I think the process of being a writer is fascinating and almost really inexplicable. I mean, Sue Grafton used to call it the magic, because to sort of untangle all of the puzzle pieces, to just smash a metaphor there, is really fascinating, but it's really a little bit difficult. I wanted to, in the murder list, what came first was actually, this sounds so funny, and I didn't think about it until almost in the midst of the book, was when I was a little girl a long time ago, I used to watch Perry Mason on TV with my father.
Oh,
my stepfather was a remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Or if you've seen the reruns at least. My stepfather was a pretty tough corporate lawyer, and he loved Perry Mason. And my little sister and I were only allowed to watch it with him if we didn't talk. We could only talk, not a word, right? We could only talk during the commercials. And during the commercials, we'd say, what does immaterial mean? What does irrelevant mean? And we learned to yell objection, if our siblings were taking our seats in front of the TV. Anyway, but I did learn, even then from Perry Mason, that the police could arrest the wrong person, that a bad guy might not be the bad guy if you just learned how to ask the right questions, that standing up for, that people were innocent until proven guilty, and that standing up for the little guy, like Perry did, was a valuable part of society and what really made justice work. So that sort of burbled in my soul for a long time. Life went on, and I became a television reporter and worked in real crime, covered real crime, not just fictional television Perry Mason crime, and we can talk about that too. But I've eventually married a defense attorney, a criminal defense attorney, and this is the domino that pushed the murder list into being. He and I were having breakfast one Sunday morning, and he was telling me the details of a particularly grisly, scary murder case that he was working on. He was defending the... Yeah, I know. Well, Hank and Jonathan, this is our breakfast. Typical lawyer and reporter, this is what we talk about. So he was representing the defendant in a murder case here in Boston. And with one track of my brain, I was listening to the details and the evidence of this case. But with the other track of my brain, I was thinking, what a good guy my husband is. He's sticking up for the little guy. He's making sure the jury understands that someone is innocent until proven guilty. He's standing up for the rights of the individual. He's protecting this guy from this supreme power of the state and the prosecution. He's such a good guy, protecting the little guy. And then I started thinking about the prosecutor's wife, listening to her husband talk about this case, on the other side of town, where with every bit of his essence that my husband wants this person to be found not guilty, the prosecutor wants him to be put in prison for the rest of his life. Wow. And did his wife think, what a good guy he is. He's protecting the public. He's standing up for law and order. He's making sure the system works. He's keeping criminals off the street. He's protecting all of us, the rights of society. And, what a good guy he is. And then I thought, wait a minute, how can everybody be the good guy? How can there be good guys on both sides, right? Isn't that so interesting? And so I wondered whether I could write a psychological thriller, and the kind of books I write that are deceptive and manipulative and sort of full of gaslighting and psychological back and forthing, cat and mouse game stories, whether I could create a book where the reader could believe that all three main characters were good, but equally believe at some point that if you turn the puzzle over, that on the other side, each of those three characters might also be bad, depending on what they mean is good and what you mean as good, and sort of make the reader be the jury to decide who the good guy is, and realize that, is good what you hope it is good what we're told it is there a real ideal that's actually good? And each of us as jurors, would decide in this story who really was the good guy and who wasn't. So this is, so that's where it came from. I mean, it's a murder mystery, right? It's a psychological murder mystery, and I want you to miss your stop on the bus because you can't put it down. I want you to stay up late at night because you can't put it down. But
you were successful.
Thematically,
you were successful for me.
I love hearing that. Good. Thematically, it's about the essence of good. Plot-wise, we can talk about that as well. Plot-wise, it's a murder mystery. But my books, I always like to think of them as kind of Trojan horses that you think you're reading one thing, but then you realize inside they're actually something else.
Yeah, there was definitely a lot of that in this book. I know. I was every time I turned the page, I was thinking, "Oh my gosh, I was wrong before. Now I'm right. Now I'm wrong."
Oh, good. I love that. That's perfect, and that's exactly what I'm trying to do. That's the essence of suspense, isn't it? It's not only readers, it's not only characters making decisions about what they're going to do, but smart readers like you two making decisions about what must be happening in the book. And what I'm trying to do is make that be surprising, but not ridiculous.
Right.
One of the things I loved about getting into the book was that, present question of, who's on the good side, who's on the bad side, and seeing it from both perspectives. And I think for most readers, you're going to have an impression of that, right? Prosecution, defense, who's good, who's bad, going into the book, just based upon your life experiences. And I thought you right away made the reader question that. And I thought that was a real winning part of it. It just drew me in.
Thank you. Tremendously. That is such a huge and important element of the book, because I do think, and that's why I picked Rachel North as a law student who's trying to figure out whether she wants to be a defense attorney or a prosecuting attorney. And I do think that if any of us, in our imaginations went to law school and had to decide whether to be a defense attorney or a prosecuting attorney, there would be a way that we would lean. There would be a way that we would feel was the good guy. And I can't agree with you more about that. And I wanted the readers to realize early on in the book that although Jack Kirkland, Rachel North's lawyer husband, is a defense attorney, and Martha Gardner, Rachel North's employer, is a prosecutor, that they each have an element of good in what they're doing. And just as important, they each sincerely and thoroughly believe that they're the good guy.
I was going to say that was accomplished, check, because that was check. Exactly.
So you came up with this great idea, and obviously you executed it brilliantly, but we're wondering, how does Hank go about that? Does she write a big outline ahead of time, or do you just dive in with an idea? The old, are you a pantser or a plotter type question?
Every time I write a book, and I'm in the midst of writing my 12th one right now, my 12th published novel, which is so funny to say. Every
amazing.
time I write a book, I think, I wish I had an outline. And the next time I'm going to do this like a grown-up person and make an outline. But I don't have time to make an outline now, so I'm just going to pursue this. I'm just going to plow ahead, not knowing what's going to happen. And that has happened every time. I have never made an outline for a book.
Mm-hmm.
I just sit down, type chapter 1. I have this, I had that, the vague idea about who's a good guy. I knew I had Rachel, Jack, and Martha.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that I was going to have this sort of twisty triple triangle of suspense, that we didn't know who was good and who was bad and the key of a book to me, and I'll tell you about the process in 1 second, but knowing this, that the key of a book for me is what people want and how far they'll go to get it. So I didn't even know that at the beginning. And as a reporter, I've been a television reporter for 43 years, which is so crazy. And I'm still on the air at Channel 7 here in Boston.
And here I thought you were only 43 years old when I saw you.
Yeah, right. I love that. Could you write that down and send it to me? As a reporter, I'm out looking for the story, right? I don't know the story when I begin because then it wouldn't be new. So I think part of my psyche allows me to begin working on a story, researching a story when I don't know what the result of the story will be. I don't know what the end will be. And I think when you talk about process, that's the same process that I use in writing a novel. Just like looking for a new story, I'm looking for my story. And the only way to find the story is to start to write it and see what occurs. Just like when I'm writing for an investigative story for television, I'm doing research and following leads and tracking down clues and doing interviews and talking to people and going places. Well, that's exactly what I'm doing in the book. So
only with your imagination.
Only with my imagination. But, my books are very realistic. They absolutely could happen, and people do what they would really do. People have the knowledge and the experience and the access that they would really have. So I say to myself every day, what would someone really do? What would Rachel really do? What would Jack really do? What would Martha really do? What would they think? And what would they care about? And what would they want? So that's what leads me through the process of the story. And that's what gets me to the computer every day is I think, well, I wonder what's going to happen. I wonder who's going to say what and what they're going to do and how far they'll go. And it surprises me every day. So when people say, wow, the ending of The Murder List, you really surprised me. I'm like, yeah. Wasn't that
me too.
I surprised myself, talk about a surprise ending. So I didn't know how it would end. So think about that from the standpoint of when people say, oh, I really, I saw that coming. I'm like, you did? Because I didn't,
How could you have?
Exactly.
That's great.
And that means and when you write without an outline, it means that the foreshadowing is not intentional, right? It's just there because it's true.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, right? So I'm not putting it there to make you think something. I'm putting it there because it's there. I mean, it's kind of, woo-woo when you think about it.
It is.
I'll be, halfway through the book and think, oh, that's who called.
I love that.
Well, I know
gives me
with
shivers.
Cathi and I, like she's a plotter and I'm a pantser, and it's the same thing. When I got to the end, and then people were like, "Oh, when that happened, I could see that," and I'm like, "Oh, I didn't know that was going to happen then." But that's good foreshadowing that I put in there.
Right. That's so true. Okay, so Hank, I think Christy, right? It's time for the carafe question, don't you think?
Yes.
Okay, so Hank, we have today an imaginary carafe, empty wine carafe.
Okay.
Oh, good.
I'll shake it. Okay.
Okay, you shake it. And so we always love to ask kind of a fun, random question out of this wine carafe of questions.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
If you don't like it,
I'm terrified.
No. If you don't like it, you can just say pass, and we'll try another one.
Yeah, because some of them may not apply. I don't know. All right, let's see what this one is. Okay. What's the best thing you've ever cooked?
What's the best thing I've ever cooked?
Yes.
Oh.
Oh, that's
I
a
love
great
this.
question.
That
I am kind of a good cook. And the best, I spent hours and hours making Julia Child's French onion soup.
Oh.
And it takes a long time because it's just, you have to saute the onions very, very gently. Because if you cook them too quickly, they don't soften properly and they get brown around the edges, and then it's bad, and then they taste different. So, and it's just onions and butter and I think leeks, I can't remember, and chicken broth. And it if you don't know what you're cooking when you're making onion soup, do you know how bad it smells?
Yeah.
I mean, right? I mean, it's horrible until someone says, "Oh, it's onion soup." Then, delicious.
Then it's,
so
and
it takes hours and hours.
I was thinking it must smell so good. Yeah.
No, it does if you know it's onion soup. And then you cook it for hours and hours, and then you put it in separate dishes, heavy ceramic dishes, and put a toasted piece of baguette on the top, and then you cover it with Parmesan cheese and put it in the oven. So the top is all bubbly and crispy with cheese, and then this baguette underneath soaks up the onion soup, and it's just, and the cheese just suffuses through the soup. It's delicious. I'm making myself starving.
I know. I'm like salivating over here. I'm like
thinking of it. It's really, really good with a crisp green salad and a wonderful, Prosecco or champagne or white wine. It just couldn't be better. It takes a long time, so you need a lot of patience. Just like my famous risotto. I'm also a good risotto maker, and that takes a long time and a lot of patience too. Maybe because of writing books, I've learned that it takes a while, and you have to work on it, and you have to keep stirring, and you have to be careful, and the littlest bit of change will alter the whole thing, right? Just like writing a book.
Yep.
So,
well, you throw a salad into that with the risotto and the soup. It sounds like a delicious meal. I'm just saying.
It's delicious, and they're beautiful. That's the other thing. When you make something that's so pretty, and it's lovely to see. I do think that. I mean, I don't want to push this, but writing is a lot like cooking. You have a good idea. And then you put a lot of stuff together to see if it'll work, and you take a lot of time and patience with it, and then you get to see the gorgeous end result, and then you get to share it with someone. If I made onion soup for myself, it wouldn't be as much fun as if I made onion soup and got to give it to my husband and say, "Look what I made for you. Look what I made for us." And then he says, "This is delicious," or, "This is a 5-star good book." It's the same kind of creativity and then love that comes. The same thing as writing a book. So
well,
I love that you have cooking questions.
That was great. Okay,
Yes.
so I want to talk about, though, how you get this all done.
Yeah.
Now
that we know that she's doing these real long cooking spells too.
Yeah,
I'm like,
right now especially.
Well, it's interesting because once I started writing fiction, we started eating a lot of carry-out salmon from Whole Foods. Cooking was one of the first things to go. My goal is to make a riveting, page-turning novel. The Murder List has gotten so much acclaim and so many wonderful reviews. And the idea of this twisty-turny triple triangle of suspense and what will happen and who's the good guy. And I love to talk to people about that. So that's really the fuel for me, the idea of having such a suspenseful book that Library Journal calls it a must-read. That this is so cooking sort of goes away, sleeping kind of goes away. Although I love sleeping, you just begin to focus on the things that are the most important. I haven't really changed the shelf paper in my cabinets for a while. There's just some things that you just don't do. But when you're obsessed, when you're compelled to get something done, we're going to do it.
Right. You find a way.
I don't have any houseplants that live. That's enough.
I can't keep them alive either. I agree. Yeah. And I don't have anything going on.
In addition to your work as a journalist, your prolific work as a novelist, you blog at Career Authors, my favorite, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we love Career Authors.
and juggle red, and you're active on social media, and you go to conferences. You're a wonderful mentor and teacher to other writers. Do you have kind of a set schedule to your day, or do you have some productivity secrets or tricks that you would share with us?
Well, first of all, thank you for the kind words. I am really overjoyed and thrilled that in this half of my life I get to do this. I mean, who would have thought? I didn't start writing till I was 55. And who would have thought that this whole new second half of my life would be taken up with this incredible dream come true kind of thing. So part of the impetus for me is that I'm just so happy about it. I'm so honored and thrilled about it. From, practically from the standpoint of getting things done, I set goals that are achievable so I can succeed every day. So instead of saying, I have to write a book, I set a goal of 540 words a day. Actually, my secret goal was 1,000 words a day. But if I hit 540 words a day in writing my first draft, then I think, yes, I win, I succeed. And I know that if I write that many words a day, I'll be done in time to have enough time to edit, to have enough time to make my deadline. So instead of having this free-floating anxiety about, am I ever going to get done, I cut off the piece that I know I can do. I do that, I succeed, and I think I win, I can do this, and then I do it the next day. I have an incredible number of lists that tell me the things that I need to do, sort of day by day when things need to be done by. And on the days that the things that I don't have to do that day, I do not worry about them. I mean, people say to me, where are you going to be next week? And I'm like, I don't know, it's not tomorrow.
Oh, that's good advice. Live in the moment.
You see what I mean? I know it sounds crazy, and you have to plan. Obviously I know that I need to have plane reservations made for me and I need to pack, but I put that on the day that I can do it. So the idea of, oh my goodness, what am I going to do about X, Y, and Z, which is 2 months from now? I don't think about that. Unless it's something that I need to be doing now. Because you can spend a lot of brain time filling up with worrying about things that is going to result in your saying, I'll think about that later. So why not just think about that later, but mark it down so you don't forget, and then just go on to what you need to do right now.
Good advice.
I love that. That is very good advice. Okay, I have to go back to something you mentioned earlier. When I was, when we were both at Sleuth Fest, actually in 2018, that's where Christy and I met in your first session at the morning at Sleuth Fest. Which we bonded. We bonded, and it was life-changing for me to hear you speak. But I remember you telling the story about how you decided that you were going to write a novel and declared that to your husband.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was so inspirational to say, I'm going to do this thing, and I'm just going to go for it. And your husband heard you and said yes. And I'm wondering if you could share that story with our listeners. Because it's so great.
Oh, my goodness. Thank you. I love that story. And I remember it. I mean, it was 2000, I think, 6, possibly. I remember it so clearly. I had a good idea for a novel. I was at Channel 7, long story, but something happened, and I had a great idea for a novel. And I thought, oh, my goodness, my book. This is a perfect idea for a thriller. And I came home, and I said to my husband, sweetheart, I'm going to write a novel. I'm going to write a mystery. I finally have the idea for this book that I've always wanted to write, and I'm going to write this book. And Jonathan says, great, sweetheart. He says, but do you know how to write a book? And I said, how hard can it be? I've read a million of these. I've been reading these my whole life. And I do think that moment, which I gives me goosebumps to tell you the story, because I remember it so clearly, and so does Jonathan, such a long time ago. But I think part of it was a little bit that I was a little bit naive, that I had no idea how hard it would be. When I say how hard could it be, it's like, yeah, it could be really hard. But I didn't know that. All I knew was that I had a good idea. And as a journalist, as a reporter, and we all know in all of our lives when we have a good idea, there's a feeling that happens when you have a good idea. You just know it. And how to get to the end of that idea, we don't know that, but we're propelled and impelled and compelled and devoted to doing it. And so there was nothing that was going to stop me from that. It took me maybe a year and a little bit more to write the book that turned out to be Prime Time. that won the Agatha for Best First Mystery, which I still love that book. It's really good, I have to say. It's still selling like crazy. But, it was a little bit of naivete and a little bit of confidence and a little bit of courage and a little bit of joy, I think, that went into it. Because when you have a good idea, you smile, right? You think, yeah, this is good. I'm going to do this, and it's going to work. I mean, as human beings and as creative people, this is the thing that gives us the fuel. I always say, if I have one good idea a day, boy, do I win, right? If you had one good idea a day, that's all you need. You can go from there. And then the next day you have another good idea and you succeed. And that's how I think of my life. I try not to worry. There's that old Frank Zappa thing. I think it's Frank Zappa that said, nothing matters and what if it does? Like, whatever. And
Hank, you are so inspirational. That is,
yeah.
me and Frank Zappa, right? So,
right.
Yes.
I do think coming at the world with joy is the way to do it. And every day, pat yourself on the back a little bit, and don't forget that you're trying hard and you're doing your best. And some days you have a good idea, and that's all we can really hope for.
That's great.
Well, speaking of joy, it has been a complete joy to talk with you.
Yes.
Christie, before we go, I'll turn it over to you.
Oh, yes, because we have one final question that appeases our mysterious foodies out there. That's what we call our listeners. And we like to ask this of all the authors, and it is, which of your characters would you like to share a meal with, and what would it be?
Oh my goodness, which of my characters would I like to share a meal with? If I can tell you this, well, I have two answers because that's a typical Hank thing. My first answer is I was going to say Ellie Berenson, and you don't know her because she is the character in my newest book that I'm writing right now called The First to Lie. This is breaking news.
Cool.
The First to Lie, which comes out next August, so I hope you'll invite me to talk to you about that. And
Absolutely.
I'd love to have dinner with Ellie Berenson, whatever she chooses, because I'd love to know what she's really up to. I'd love to sort of interview her to find out what it is that she really wants, because right now she's behaving very mysteriously, and I haven't quite figured that out. Another character that I'd love to have dinner with is Ashlyn Bryant, who is one of the main characters in my book, Trust Me.
Oh, yes.
She is manipulative. She is deceptive. She has quite an agenda, and she's absolutely brilliant at gaslighting. And she may be telling the truth, and I'd like to talk with her a little bit more, again, about what she's trying to do. That my book, Trust Me, was my first standalone. Mm-hmm. I'm so proud of that book, and if you haven't read it, I urge you to.
We actually did it on our podcast last season. We talked about it.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
That was a big change for me to write a standalone, and really freeing and really amazing. And in the murder list, I'd love to have Jack and Rachel and Martha all have dinner with me and just see what they say to each other. Wouldn't that be fun? Those three,
yes. Oh my
those
gosh.
three are really pieces of work.
Yep.
I'd love to see what really happened. When the book is over, our connection with those characters disappears, but they continue to exist in book world, and I'd love to know what really happens to them
now
and what
I'm
they say to each other now. Yeah, can't you?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Just to recap, we've been talking to Hank Phillippi Ryan, whose award-winning thrillers are some of our favorites, including her latest, The Murder List.
And Hank, if our listeners have any more questions for you or want to get some information about you, what's the best way to reach out?
Oh my goodness, thank you. I'm so pleased you asked me that. I'm on Instagram way too much at Hank P. Ryan. And Facebook, I know it's terrible, at Hank P. Ryan, and on Facebook at Hank Phillippi Ryan Author, and on Twitter at Hank P. Ryan. I'm always at Career Authors. I'm always at Jungle Red. You see, now I'm thinking, how do I ever get anything done?
I know, right?
Or you can email me from my website, hankphillippiryan.com. If you click on Contact on my website, it comes right to me with nobody, no middle person, nobody in between. So I'm going to see it. So click on contact on HankPhillippiRyan.com, and I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to chat with you. I'd love to know what I can do for you or help you with, or how I can make your life be better. And how you like the books. That's so important. Next time we should talk about the importance of leaving a review, a good review of the book, because that is such a major deal these days.
Okay, so along those lines, we'd also love to hear from the listeners about this Corks and Conversation with Hank. And so you can reach us at Twitter or Facebook at GOB Writers.
And if you like listening, please subscribe to us so you can listen to our upcoming Corks and Conversations with other authors, as well as our regular Game of Books episodes where we pair food, wine, and mystery. New episodes come out every Friday morning, just in time for the weekend.
So this is Christy.
And Cathi.
Saying thanks for listening. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.